Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very much delighted to invite here and welcome in our Ukraine Crisis Media Center our honored speakers, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Latvia, Mr. Edgars Rinkevics, and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Iceland, Mr. Gunnar Bragi Sveinsson. They will brief us on the support that these countries are constantly providing to Ukraine to stand for its democracy, stability, unity, and European integration direction. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming at rather, as I understand, short notice, and I'm really delighted to speak with you and to provide a kind of briefing about the visit of my colleague from Iceland as well as myself here in Kiev in Ukraine. We arrived yesterday. We met with President Poroshenko and Foreign Minister Klimkin immediately, discussed the situation in the eastern Ukraine, Ukrainian and European Union relations, and I just want to say that Latvia, as also future EU presidency for the first half of 2015, strongly supports Ukraine in its struggle for territorial integrity. We think that Ukrainian government has right to do necessary steps and to do necessary efforts to regain control over the whole country. We also discussed possible support from the European Union. As we speak now, I'm also getting briefings from Brussels where extraordinary meeting of the heads of state and government of the European Union take place, and also some possible further actions by the EU are being discussed. From my point of view, I just want to say that Latvia has a particular feeling, of course, for Ukrainian people at this moment. We have some common history. We also understand that here right now probably the shape of the whole European security of 21st century is being kind of shaped. Also, we have discussed our presidency. Next May, Riga will host summit of the heads of state of European Union as well as Eastern partners. I think that it's a time to revise Eastern Partnership. We have 3 countries that have just signed association agreements with European Union, namely Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. Latvian Parliament ratified all 3 agreements, including EU-Ukrainian Association Agreement on Monday. And I think that now we have to prepare next steps, because we all see that association agreements are not the end of the road, actually it's the beginning of the road. So necessary steps how to implement association agreements, what kind of practical assistance we can render. Also we should at Riga summit to revise the whole Eastern Partnership concept, to have more individual, more tailored approach. I also hope that by Riga summit we will be able to conclude visa liberalization program with Ukraine. It's quite a homework for both sides, also for Ukrainian side, technical side, but I also think that we have to give a certain signal also to both, to Ukrainian society, also to European Union, that we continue our integration efforts. Also, I do hope that we will be able to expand and to use such tools as common security and defense policy, that we will be able to assist also in the reform process, not only of Ukrainian economy, but also of security sector. And certainly we are ready to work with our Ukrainian friends in preparations for our presidency. And as I said, we understand that currently all efforts are being spearheaded to tackle the current crisis, but we also have to think about the day after. And I'm quite confident that the day after there is, and that Ukraine is going to have a bright future, and that we are going to see Ukraine much closer to the European Union and to Europe. And from that point of view, this has been not only a visit of symbolism and support, but also a very practical discussion on next steps, also in EU's, Ukraine's relations, and also, of course, as much as we could touch, we also touched issues of bilateral cooperation. Here I will stop. I promised not to speak for 15 minutes, but I almost did it, and I will give the floor to my colleague from Iceland. I think that we have also developed very good traditions that we are traveling in pairs or in trios or in groups as foreign ministers. And I think that our visit has also shown that there is a very strong Nordic-Baltic solidarity and effort to assist our Eastern partners. So without further ado, the floor is yours, and I will just step aside.
Thank you, Minister Rinkevics. Thank you all. Good to see you again. This is my first visit to Kyiv was in December. This is my third time here. Like my colleague said, we had an interesting meeting yesterday with the President and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. People may ask why Iceland is joining, why Iceland is supporting Ukraine, this island far away in the middle of Atlantic Ocean. The simple question is, the answer is very simple. We are part of Europe, we are part of this world that we like to see, where people can live in peace and harmony. And it's our duty to step up and tell our mind when something happens, like we have seen now in Ukraine. When a neighbor starts not to recognize duties and recognize international laws, then we all have to stick together. I was very glad to hear what the President and the Minister of Foreign Affairs had to say to us, how they see the prospect and the future of Ukraine. Of course, we discussed for quite a time this situation in the eastern part, but at the same time, I can feel and hear that in the city that people are trying to look to the future and find ways to build up this beautiful country again. This day I had the meetings also with the head of the Agency for Energy and Energy Efficiency, and we discussed what Iceland can do to help Ukraine in this energy dilemma that we are facing, and we decided to take or to try to draw up on cooperation regarding geothermal possibilities here in Ukraine, and hopefully we can see something good come out of that in few weeks or months. It is important, as my colleague said, that we stick together, and by traveling in pairs or trios, like he said, is a symbol of this unity you can find between between the ministers right over the world. But of course, we have to be able to answer the questions: what will happen in the future, what will it take, or how will be the days after the war, and how we are going to build up Ukraine. And there, the politics must also be quite clear what they are ready to do and ready not to do. And I hope that we will see in next months what the international community is ready to do for Ukraine. So thank you. I'm ready to answer any questions, but Edgars, I guess you were...
I'll stay here.
Okay.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Ministers. And we have a question. Yes, we have a question.
Oksana Melnichuk, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. First of all, I would like to thank for solidarity with Ukraine. It's very important for us. The question is about a topic which is very important for us, and it is discussed actively in Ukraine. As you know, there is the question about France selling Mistral ships to Russia. What's your position about that issue? France is going to sell Mistral ships to Russia. What's your opinion about that? You understand the threats of such ships, not only for Ukraine, but also for the system of European security. Could you...
Okay. Я бы хотел сказать,
I would like to say that, first of all, the position of Latvia on this issue about selling Mistral ships, which are almost ready in France. In Latvia, we are very negative about this. We expressed our position since 2010, when we received the first information that such contract would be signed. It was signed. Now they work on that contract, and I raised that issue when I had a meeting with my French colleague during the bilateral meeting in last May. He told me that the final decision, will be taken in October, but the position of Latvia is, we believe that under such conditions, when in principle, according to our data and information from other countries have and international organizations have, there is quite a serious support of separatists in Luhansk and Donetsk. I would call it. They supply modern equipment, modern weapon system. And Russia does that. We should introduce sanctions against Russia as to weapon supplies or military equipment supplies and dual-use equipment supplies, including these ships. So it's the question it's not an issue of just economic sanctions. It's an issue of European security of all the countries of the Baltic and Black Sea region. Honestly, I cannot imagine the situation when a ship named Sevastopol will come to a harbor of Sevastopol. We had many discussions around this, and during the meetings of ministers of foreign affairs in EU and during the meetings of ministers of foreign affairs in NATO. The answer we get from our colleagues is that we have obligations, we have contracts, and we have commitments, and also there is an internal pressure, but we hope that our partners will understand all gravity of the issue, of the situation. They will review the decision. We believe that on this stage, selling high-tech, military tech technologies to Russia, that is against the security, and it's against the common sense.
I'd just like to add to this that, and I totally agree with my colleague, but how are you going to face people regarding sanctions on visas on some persons at the same time you sell them weapons, military ships? What about the sanctions?
Thanks.
Kharkov, how to step over? How do you take that Putin was hugging Merkel in Holland when other countries cannot stand against a nuclear state, Russia, and you know that Putin is insane. So the countries, former Soviet countries, but they are members of NATO, they cannot stand against such countries. How? NATO countries that don't have nuclear potential, how can they, at least politically, how can they stand against such issue like friendship between Putin and Merkel, and Putin was hugging Merkel, you know.
This is, at least part of this question is a slightly delicate political question. Of course we know that in NATO, some of the NATO nations, they do have nuclear weapons. Not all of them, of course. And I hope that we will never see nuclear weapons in all of the NATO countries. And that will never be in Iceland, I can tell you. I surely hope also that what we are seeing now is not a new Cold War or anything like that. But to solve this horrible situation that we are facing now, of course, the nations, the countries in Europe and in North America, and I would like to say all other countries, must say that to Mr. Putin that you cannot behave like this. You have to sit down, we have to solve this through a dialogue. And the dialogue must start now, and you cannot make any exceptions and so on. You have to sit down. NATO, of course, NATO has very much capabilities and ability to fight Russia, if that happens. But God knows that no one wants to see that happen, and I don't think that will happen. It's not going to happen. Before that, we will solve this by some discussions. But of course, we cannot take years and years and years in that. So the countries of Europe, North America, and other countries that are willing to support Ukraine to solve this, they must sit down today, tomorrow, and talk through this. Using threats of nuclear or anything else, this will not solve anything.
Я только что тут немножко критиковал.
I criticized some of my colleagues a little bit, but now I would like to defend them a little bit, because I wouldn't like to say that that those were hugs of Putin. And we see that Chancellor Merkel and President Hollande and other leaders of EU, they put maximum efforts to stop the development of this crisis. And what we saw, that application of sanctions, even if sometimes it seems to us that it goes very slow, only some citizens in Russian Federation or Ukraine, they are under sanctions, they are on those lists. But we see that those sanctions, they work. We see how they change, and the behavior of some top officials is changing when it's off the record. So the situation could be more negative if we did introduce such sanctions. We also understand that in the end of the day, a decision could be political. There could be a political decision, and also if Russia is not a part of the decision, is not a part of the solution, if they don't stop supplying weapons and support, then the situation in the east of Ukraine will not be ruled out. So on the level of EU, on the level of heads of states and governments, when they speak to the President of Russian Federation, and they do what they can do to use political methods and political pressure to convince Russian government just to stop and to become more constructive. As to NATO, I wanted to say that we feel that the decision taken by Baltic countries in the 90s, when on the way to NATO, to be a member, NATO member, it was all for us like to catch the last wagon on a train that is leaving. The situation now in Ukraine, and also in 2008 in Georgia, the conflict between Russian Federation and Georgia, it shows that we were right, and we understand that some of our colleagues in other countries, it's very difficult for them to conceive those changes which are taking place in the world, especially in Europe after the aggression against Ukraine, again after occupation of Crimea. And there is a period of adaptation in democratic societies. This period is more difficult. It is slow. but results will be better than in other countries which are under the propaganda and under dictatorships. Yes. We see that both NATO should work under new conditions, and this is not the 20th century anymore with massive tank operations or airborne operations, air operations, and there are other risks, and we are working on finding adequate answers. I don't believe that nuclear weapons on this stage plays any role. I'm more worried with those operations of like nice men, information war, green men. We have to work under such challenges, and we are far away from nuclear conflict. But what we see, what we need to find answers in the alliance. We need to find answers to these challenges, and also we should look and see how to help our partners and our friends. That's a fact. Bogdan Spilno TV. My question is, Andrei Mironsky, an expert, told that 500 protesters, pro-Russian protesters, would be enough to occupy Latvia. What would you say? We read sometimes interesting articles. I would like to remind that last Saturday there was full moon. The article was published 2 days after that. On one hand, we are quite ironic about that. But on the other hand, we seriously analyze such information. I don't believe that 500 militants can challenge independence of Latvia, and especially we are members of the NATO. And that guy who wrote it, he forgot that alliance took some additional measures to improve security of Latvian countries, and in Latvia. Since April, we have our allies from NATO countries and American and Canadian soldiers, and they came for tests, and they will continue those tests until that time when that will be needed. So I believe that such statements just strengthen our position that NATO should review all its planning doctrine, and especially what concerns those regions which are under the interest in the zone of interest of Russia. And it's very good because they give me a lot more arguments, those messages, even it's more from mass media for popularity than for. I told at the very beginning that we understand well enough that appetite is growing during eating, during a meal. What happened in Georgia and what is happening now in Ukraine can provoke some efforts as to other countries. We discuss these issues during our meetings with our partners in EU and NATO, and we do it quite publicly. So we also take lessons from this situation, and we understand that the situation is different on the territory in NATO and outside of NATO. Natalia Kanievskaya, first of all, we welcome you. It's great that you came to Ukraine and that thank you very much for your support. I have a question. During Soviet times, we got used that we are not told something or we are lied by politicians. You, as an official person, you who has access to information, and you discussed all these issues with your president and with the first officials of your country. How could you precisely describe the situation in the east of Ukraine? Is it expansion? Is it a civil war? Or is it pro-Russian or Russian-speaking Ukrainians and there is a civic war? Or is it an aggression of Russian Federation? This is the first question. And the second question is, near the administration of the president, I saw former Minister of Defense Koval, and there was a crowd of people. There were mothers, wives of military men who are in the east, and they are under bombs the whole day. While we are talking here, people are dying there, and we don't know how many of them are died. What can be done to stop bloodshed as soon as possible, and also to start negotiations? Thank you.
I think it is difficult to say, in fact, who these guys are. But they are militants. They are not in favor of the Ukrainian people. They are not doing the country any good. We know that for sure. But each step has to be taken very cautiously, because you cannot just storm and go over city after city by troops and so on, because there are people all over, innocent people. What is most important now is to get everyone to come down, to come to the table and try to find a solution through a dialogue. And we must pressure Russia, because we know that they have influence there. So we must stick together and pressure them to pressure these guys. That is my opinion. How to stop it? It's the same answer, I think. We have to call those people that we say that is responsible, who started this, and ask them to come and try to involve and take this decision to get involved with this situation. And it will only be solved, if we get everyone at the table to try to take this dialogue. What I am afraid of is if this will escalate and we will drag, this will take more years, more months, that will end very badly. So this is my personal opinion.
Well, to join my colleague. On the second question, I fully agree that the only way how to first stop the conflict and then to get to the stabilization phase is to get Russia to act in a responsible way. It's a political pressure, probably combined with, we call sometimes those measures, restrictive measures or sanctions. And I do hope that today, as I already referred to in my introductory remarks, European Council of the Heads of State and Government will agree on further steps how to approach Russia in a united way. Another thing is very important, that European Union, other international organizations act in unity. If we start to split over some issues, then actually our influence is decreasing times and times. From that point of view, sometimes, yes, it is disappointing, and I already said to see that, let's say, decisions are taken too late and too little. On the other hand, we still have seen that there has been united reaction of European Union. I think that this time we need to have increased pressure, but this pressure has to be coming from united European Union, not from the split European Union. So that's why we sometimes painfully search for solutions that all 28 countries can agree upon. So it's increased pressure on Russia. On first question, well, I think that we have seen two major developments. I do not think that the current situation in Ukraine can be called civil war. We have seen too much evidence, too many people coming from outside to say that really this is a civil war. I think that to some extent we could say that right now there is battle for Ukraine. And it's not battle between EU and Russia over Ukraine. It's Ukraine's decision to go its own way that has created this situation. Ukraine has decided that it wants to be closer to Europe, maybe sometimes later fully integrated in Europe. And we see that the current development is simply an attempt to stop Ukraine, to destabilize it to the point where your aspirations could be void. So I would certainly say that this is a very dangerous situation, and well, we are very sorry that already so many people have died since January, since first events on Maidans in February and now in the eastern part of Ukraine. This is also quite a tragedy, I think, not only for Ukrainian families, for Ukrainian peoples, but let's also look for those people who come from Russia, who lose their lives for whatever not very good reason, and I think that at the end of the day that's going to be quite a tragedy also for the people of Russia in general. So that would be assessment. But I always dislike to have some kind of, catchwords. I think that the situation is too complex just to try to put it in one or two phrases. It would be quite irresponsible.
Thank you so much. I know we have questions, but you are extremely pressed in time, so thanks for your insights and thanks for your constant support. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.